And the number one thing that I think the Sony a7 IV will have. Today, I'm going to talk to you about what I would like to see in the upcoming Sony a7 IV. This is my wish list, and I would love to know what your wish list is down in the comments below. But if you're new to the channel, my name is Brian the Camera Guy, and on my channel, I review Sony cameras and their lenses. So if that's something you're into, make sure you click that subscribe button and that bell notification so you don't miss out any of my videos. So today I'm going to talk to you about the Sony a7 IV and what I think it's going to have packed into it. Now the rumor is it's going to be announced sometime in October. Now there's already some rumors on SonyAlphaRumors.com. I think that some of the rumors may be a little spot on. And by some of the rumors, I mean the megapixel count. So right now Sony Alpha Rumors is stating that the Sony a7 IV is going to have a brand new 33 megapixel sensor. So why a 33 megapixel sensor? Real simple. In order to get an 8K 16:9 resolution sensor, you need a 33.17 megapixel camera. So I think that this camera coming up, the Sony a7 IV, is going to have a 33.17 megapixel sensor. And I think it's going to be brand new. I think it's going to help a little bit with the rolling shutter. Sony has always kind of had that jello-y look until they came out with the Sony a7 III. Now, how did they solve that? Is they went with a smaller megapixel sensor. So smaller megapixels equals larger photo sites, which means the sensor is only reading 12 megapixels. I just stated that this is probably going to have a 33 megapixel sensor and 8K resolution, but oh wait, I don't think it's going to actually have 8K resolution. I think what Sony's going to do is give you a downsampled 8K res into a 6K resolution. And why? Because on a lot of their Sony cameras, like the Sony a7 III, on the Sony a6000 lines, what do? They take a 6K image and they downsample it to a 4K. I think they're gonna do the same thing with an 8K sensor. They're gonna take the 8K image and downsample it to a 6K resolution. Now, why would they do that? They would do that because they want to try and get a sharper image. And when you compact that 8K image down to a 6K sensor, that's going to give you a little bit sharper, a little bit crisper image. Now, I think this camera is also going to have dual ISO. Why is that? The reason why you'd want dual ISO is because you want to make sure that your noise is limited. And with a bigger sensor, you're going to have more noise, more grain, the higher you get up on the video end. And starting off at a low ISO is definitely something that's doable. Now, having a lower ISO is definitely something that helps contain that noise, contain that grain. When you raise up that ISO, you're gonna get a lot more grain, a lot more noise. Now, what they did in the Sony a7S III is they introduced dual ISO. So when you went over 12,800, it got super clean again. And I think they're gonna do the same thing here because they also did it in the Sony a1. But there, the dual ISO is much lower. I think it's 6,400. But I think they're gonna go ahead and do the same thing here. And why are they gonna do 33 as well? Is because it's gonna help with photos. So it's gonna be a little bit sharper, a little bit crisper photos. I think this camera is really gonna be a hybrid between the Sony a7R IV and the Sony a7S III. It's gonna be like they had a baby and ultimately spit out the Sony a7 IV. Now that 33 megapixel sensor is also gonna be extremely helpful for photos. 24 megapixels is nice, it's pretty good. If you crop in too far, you start getting a little pixelization. Now, are you gonna notice it a ton if you're viewing these on 4:6? Probably not, but if you wanna blow up the print and make it a little bit bigger, you're gonna start noticing it. And I think a 33 megapixel sensor is gonna help with that. So photo-wise, I think this camera is gonna be fantastic. I think it's gonna check all the boxes for everybody. For video, this is where that dual ISO is gonna come in super handy. So a bigger megapixel sensor is gonna have smaller megapixels to read. I think it's ultimately gonna mean that it needs to have that dual ISO to make sure that it stays super clean. One of the things that Sony has prided itself on is having nice low light capabilities. If you want the supreme low light capability, you want to go with the Sony a7S III. But if you're somebody like myself who uses their cameras to mostly film their family, do occasional vlogs, then having a dual ISO and having a camera that is sub 3500 is definitely more in line, more in budget with what you're looking to do as maybe a content creator or as a father. Plus, on top of it, other cameras already have it. So other camera systems already have dual ISO. So I think Sony's right on that bandwagon. I think it's good. I think they want to stay a little bit on the innovative side. They don't want to fall behind from some of the other camera manufacturers that are already offering this. Now, with that improved sensor, I'm really hoping, like I said, that they get rid of the rolling shutter. How are they going to do that? I think they're going to put in that new processor, the one that's in the Sony a7S3 and in the Sony a1. I think they're going to do that because that processor is better and it's going to give you faster readout. So I think that will help with the rolling shutter, is because they will be able to read that sensor much faster. Now, with the new processor comes the new menu system. Now, the new menu system has been getting rave reviews from people who are using the Sony a7S3 or the Sony a1. And that new menu system, I think, is going to be nice. Now, what would be nice is on this camera having the ability to tap on what setting you want to use when you're going through the menus. I think that would be extremely helpful when you're using the system, because one of the things that's very frustrating is you got to tap the focus on most of the Sony cameras, but you don't have the ability to scroll through menus. One of the other things I would love to see is to be able to tap on the screen and be able to change your settings. Like if you want to change from f4 to f2.8, or if you want to change your ISO and up that would be extremely helpful. I don't know if Sony's going to give it to us in this camera, but it would be great if they did. That would be fantastic. And then if they could do a firmware update on the Sony a7S3, then people wouldn't feel like they're missing out on anything. I think this camera, if you have the Sony a7S3, is going to be a great B cam. So the Sony a7 IV is going to be a great B cam. It's also going to be a good one if you want to do photos as well. I think those two things combined are going to make this a top seller in the end of 2021, beginning of 2022. Now, with the camera having dual ISO, I think it's also going to give us a little bit better performance on the S-Logs. I would love to see Sony try and get the S-Logs down to like 250. So right now I'm shooting on the Sony a7C, and right now to use S-Log 2 and S-Log 3, the ISO starts at 500. I would love for them to be able to have you start the ISO at like 250. There's plenty of times you're outside and having that 500 ISO really makes it tough because you're already cranking up the shutter or you're throwing an ND filter on there. So do you want to have a super dark ND filter? I don't know. It'd be nice if the ISO could start at 250, because then you don't need as much ND to go ahead and create a good image. So that would be extremely helpful, extremely nice. Now with the S-Logs, I would also love to see a little bit better gamma assist. So this way you can actually view your image and kind of get a real idea of what your image is going to look like in video. So this way you can better compose it, better expose it. Because one of the things that's very difficult about the S-Logs is really trying to expose the image properly. And the assist helps, but it'd be really nice if you could get the assist to work 100% of the time. So you know what the finished product is going to look like, but it's recording in log. I don't think they're going to allow you to upload LUTs to the camera. I just don't think that's going to happen. They don't offer it with the Sony a7S3. They're not going to offer it with the Sony a7 IV. If they could just improve the gamma assist, that would be more than helpful enough to help with composing of the shots. Now this camera is not going to have Sony's S-Cinetone. There's no way they're going to put that in there. That is reserved for the Sony a7S3. That one has it. And then the Sony cinema lines, the FX3, 6, and 9, they all have that Sony Cinetones. I don't think they're giving it to you in the Sony a7 IV. I don't think they're going to totally want to cannibalize their cameras by giving you a ton of features that some of the higher end cameras are offering. Now, one of the things the Sony a7 IV has to have, in my opinion, is a fully articulating screen, similar to the a7S III, FX3, same as the Sony a7C. And the reason why is you can achieve a lot better angles with that fully articulating screen. They've given it to us. I don't think they're going to take it away. I think it's very important that this has a fully articulating screen, because at the end of the day, I think there's going to be a lot of content creators that are going to want to upgrade their camera gear to this camera. Now with that, I would love to see some improvement on that LCD screen. I think it's like 1.1 or 1.4 million dots or something like that. I would love to see this thing go over 2 million dots. That would be so great. It would so much help with being able to compose your shot and making sure that what you have is in focus. I don't know about you, I don't normally use the eyepiece very often. I'm usually using the back of the screen, and with that it would be extremely helpful to have more dots, more resolution, to be able to see exactly what you're doing. I think that would also help with the exposing of the S-Logs, because sometimes you can't really tell what's in focus with such a flat image. I would love to see them improve the LCD screen. Now, do I think you're gonna get a better EVF? I do. I think you're gonna get over a $3 million EVF. I don't think they're gonna give you that EVF from the Sony a7S III or even the one from the Sony a1. I think they're gonna give you a $3 million one. That's totally fine. I think that's totally acceptable. Like I said, I barely use the eyepiece. I use more of the back of the screen. Usually I just use the eyepiece when I'm checking my footage to make sure that everything came out okay. Now, it would be nice to have a little bit better of an EVF to help with composing of the shots, definitely, for sure. Now, that is the one thing that I cannot stand about the Sony a7C is that eyepiece, that EVF is so small. It's so small. You're like really jamming your eye in there to try and see things. And if you give us a $2 million LCD on the back, that would be even better for somebody like myself who's a content creator. Most people are using their cameras for photos and videos. It's time that Sony ups that screen on the back. It needs to happen. They did it with the refresh of the Sony a7R 4A, and I think they can do it right here. Like I said, this is going to be a combination, in my opinion, of the Sony a7S III and the Sony AR4 having a baby, spitting out the Sony a7 IV. So we got the fully articulating screen, but what is the number one thing, the number one wish that I have for the Sony a7 IV? Simple, 10-bit color, 10-bit 422 color. We can't go backwards. 8-bit's okay, but 10-bit is what we want. Why? Because it can give you a beautiful, crisper, gorgeous image. It gives you more colors to work with. Hell, the Apple iPhone and even the Samsung Galaxies offer 10-bit color. There is no reason why in 2021 and 2022 that Sony shouldn't give us 10-bit 422 color. Now, are they going to give us that all intra and all that stuff? Probably not. They're going to probably scale it down, because if you want the absolute best image, they're going to want you to go with the Sony a7S III. And I'm totally fine with that. I will take all that as long as I get that 10-bit color. Other camera manufacturers are offering it. The GH5 was offering it back in 2017. It's time for Sony to just scrap the 8-bit. You want to upgrade people from their cell phones to cameras. If you want to get that market back, get that 10-bit color. It's super important. I think if you're shooting with the Sony camera and you're paying really high money for a camera, you want to have the best image possible. And I think 10-bit color gets you there. I think that's the number one thing that Sony needs to add to this camera. What is this all going to price out to? Now, with all that, a lot of people are hoping this thing is going to cost less than $2,000 US. No way. With the features, with inflation, with everything that is happening right now, I think this camera is going to run to $2,500, $2,499. So just south of that $2,500. So $2,499 US. It's going to be exceptional hybrid camera. It's going to give you great stills, beautiful video. It's going to be everything you need. And I think if you buy this camera, you're going to be set for at least 2 years. I think this might be the best hybrid camera for somebody who's looking to get into it, who's looking to get into content creation, who's looking to get into YouTube, who's looking to maybe have exceptional video quality. I think the Sony a7 IV is going to be the camera of 2022. So what do you think is going to be in the Sony a7 IV? I would love to know. Let's have a conversation down in the comments below. Hey, if you stayed to the end of the video, you're awesome. Thanks so much. It was great hanging out with you. If you like this video, I'm sure you're gonna like the video on the screen now. It's about another camera with the Sony system. Before you leave, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Thanks for watching.